Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Frequency. So in this episode, we deal heavily with, Frank having to basically go through with it. It's like, okay, we found out who the Nightingale killer is, supposedly. And it's like, oh, obviously it's Joe. So it's like, hey, it's like, Frank, when you're back in past in 96, you have to track him down and kill him. But he's essentially, Raimi is like, hey, you got to make it perfect. You got to make sure, like, there's no trace evidence of anything that'll lead it back to you. Make it steal, like, some money from the church, like he did in present day when he went on a run with Megan, to make it seem like, oh, he ran away so people won't be looking for him, essentially. Which Frank is super, like, not okay with it, which is understandable, because, like, no matter how much of a piece of crap human being he is, being the Nightingale or whatever, it still doesn't make it any easier killing someone, because he's, it's just like, if there's a difference between killing someone out of self-defense and just outright killing someone, and this would just be outright killing someone, and it's like, he's not 100% okay with this. I mean, he realizes why he needs to do it. He needs to do it to protect his wife, and not just her, to protect all future Nightingale victims, too. Especially because, remember the whole Amanda situation. He saved her present day, in 96, but then in 2016, like, Nightingale caught up with her again and killed her. So Frank really has to struggle with that. And he even brings up a very valid point of being like, the fact of the matter is, how do we know this is actually going to work? How do you know we're not just going to make things worse? Which is a valid point, because it's like, it's not like any of them really know how this whole time thing works. It's like, you don't really know how the dominoes will fall, Because it's like, especially because, like, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think he's Nightingale. Because there's so much stuff that came up in this episode that conflicted. Don't get me wrong. It seems like he's a piece of crap. Don't get me wrong. But it's hard to really say where everything really is in the grand scheme of things. Because, when he first talks to Megan, he talks about the fact that it's like, oh, you see what happens when your stories happen. So it's kind of like maybe she lied, or because the fact is, because even there's a point where Raimi was listening to the tapes from, like, the past, like, therapy sessions that Megan went through, and it was kind of like, it's like, obviously it's one of those situations where Joe is kind of a good manipulator. He got everyone else thinking like, oh, he's this good, wholesome deacon. He's the family man. There's no way he could be a terrible person, especially a terrible person that Megan pretends him to be. It's like, your mom and your brother didn't say anything. It's because my mom and brother are scared of him. Of course they're going to say whatever he wants them to say. They're not going to turn against him, because it's like they already get it bad enough already. So it's to the point, it's like if they turn on him, they're just going to get it worse later on, because he'll do it. Because he's one of those bad guys that are very charming, that could easily, sway people. So, because you even saw this moment, because he had that, like, it was almost a psychotic moment where it's just like, you hear him beating their mom in the other room, and all of a sudden he opens the door, because they're sitting on the steps and everything, overhearing the entire thing, and he comes out and he's like, so who wants ice cream? It's like, wait, what? I mean, because in his mind, at least the way Megan's setting it up, it's like he was doing that because in his mind he was saving them. It was like trying to beat a proper lesson into them, and their mom included. And it's like, because Megan even says it very interestingly enough, like, the fact is that he looks for any sign of imperfection because he enjoyed doing that he just wanted an excuse to do it, essentially. So even taking them to a specific cabin and beating the crap out of her brother. So, because part of me, I don't know, because I feel like he's not necessarily Nightingale. I feel like there's a lot more to this that we just don't know, and it's really hard to say, like, what's the reality with this whole situation. I mean, so much went down in this episode, like, breaking everything down, it's like, you have Frank and Raimi trying to decide what they're going to do when this is all said and done. It's like, from Raimi's, I think out of anyone, Raimi's the most positive about how this is going to end, because it's like, she's dealing with the whole Daniel situation, because it's like, oh, she finally got Daniel back in her life. I mean, granted, he still has to break things off with his fiance and whatnot, but then things get complicated because Kyle gets in a car accident. I mean, it was like basically just chasing a suspect or whatever, was in an accident, goes to check on that hospital, and it's like, oh, lo and behold, who's there with him? His mom, who apparently, like, he's kind of talked very nicely about Raimi talking about how the fact is that he's always kind of had these butterfly feelings in his stomach ever since he first met her, kind of love at first sight type of situation. And her mom's just going on and on about it. He's kind of like, Mom, hush. And that kind of got Raimi seeing him in a different light. She's like, there's a lot more to him than that. Because it's like, obviously she already kind of liked him, especially because she took that step forward because, you know, in her mind, because Frank had told her previously, like, you should kind of go on with your life because there's no guarantee your life will be fixed back the way it was. But Raimi, with the way things are now, is kind of like, well, she's got Daniel again. She's like, things will work out because it's like, you know, because, you know, throwing out a possibility that her life might not go back to the way it was. Maybe she won't be with Daniel, but she's kind of like, no, it's going to work out. It's like, we're together now. It's like, we're kind of meant to be, so it's going to happen that way. Like, we're going to be together. It's like, it's already happening now. I mean, granted, this isn't a perfect example of fate to be, because it's like, he's dumping his current fiance to be with you after you kind of had to stalk him a little bit. You know, there's just so many extenuating circumstances to the whole situation, so it's not so clear cut and dry. But at the same time, you do feel bad for Kyle because she actually starts feeling bad too, because it's like, she even says to herself, like, she feels like if it was a different time and place, her and Kyle, she could actually see herself with Kyle. And there's even a point when it came to Daniel, it's like, hey, I'm going to tell my fiance at dinner tonight. And she's like, I don't tell her. She's like, wait, he's like, wait, what? You don't, okay, you wanted me to tell her, now you're telling me don't. It's like, give her one more night with you that, you know, you owe her that much. And it's like, she's like, I'll explain everything. Because she's like, basing everything on the fact is that, like, hey, tomorrow it's all going to be over, time's going to be rewritten, so it's not going to matter. So kind of like, she even takes time to actually sit down with Kyle and gets to talk to him and everything like that. Because the fact of the matter is, this episode was setting it up. I was like, there's so much that can go wrong in this episode, which it does, but I'll get to that in a second. On the flip side of things, you have like things between Julie and Frank getting better. She's being more accepting. She's like, okay, I get it. You can't come to like this recital that Raimi has and everything because it's work and everything. But she's like, I get it. I understand. I don't need to know the details. Just, you know, we're slowly taking steps forward. We're working this out. That's kind of all that really matters right now. You know, that we're going in the right direction. So he's almost struggling with that too, because it's like, I think it's a situation where in the back of his mind, Frank is almost wondering, is like, does he deserve to come back? Like, no matter what happens, like, even if he, you know, killing Nightingale and whatever, well, won't change the fact is that he did what he did, that he hurt someone. So does that mean, you know, will he deserve to go back to his family? I mean, it just, because it seems like he's very concerned about it, which is like, he's rightfully to do so, because it's like, he's taking another person's life, not out of self-defense, just outright. I mean, you could argue it is self-defense, because it's like, hey, this person's going to kill your wife and many other people in the future, so... But still, you know, it's one of those situations of like, oh, it's the best example. It's like, would you kill baby Hitler? Knowing who Hitler becomes, does that justify you killing him when he's younger, before he goes off to commit the atrocities he had eventually do much later on in his life? And kind of similar question. I know that happens all the time when I refer to time travel and stuff like that. I think I've mentioned that multiple times when it came, probably to this show as well as other things. I've always used Hitler because it's the best example that I feel like a lot of people can, you know, get behind. Because like I said, when it comes to time travel, that's the go-to one, being like, oh yeah, go back in time and kill Hitler, kind of prevent the Holocaust from ever happening, like greatly impacting World War II and whatnot. But nevertheless, very reluctant to do it, but if it means, you know, cutting, you know, the tree off at the trunk, well, then he has to do it, especially if it means protecting his wife as well as other victims. So he kidnaps Joe, and it seems like everything is okay, but there was a little hitch in the plan, because he gets a message from Julie, because apparently Raimi had left her clarinet or whatever in the back of his car, and then like he was responding to the message trying to get the bag, and ends up getting hit by a car, so he ends up in an accident. At the same time, in present day, they track down Joe. Raimi arrives on scene, basically, because Megan managed to get a message out. But Joe ends up killing her. Well, appears to be killing her. What we saw was, we heard a few gunshots, and then when they walked in, her head was bloody. So either maybe a bullet grazed her head, or maybe he straight up killed her. Raimi chases him. He kind of surrenders and gives up. She kind of lowers her gun like she's not going to kill him. And then she just shoots him in the head. And just like, the cop walks up and is like, what did you do? She's like, I killed the bastard. She's like, it's not like any of it matters. Because from Raimi, she figured there were going to be like, she's like, there's no point to it. Because it's like, Frank's going to kill him and it's going to erase everything anyway. So it's not like that really happened. Many different things I thought was going to go wrong. For one, because another thing in this episode was that we met, like, at the time of him getting supplies, getting ready to, do what he's about to do to Joe. When he was getting all those supplies ready, he ended up bumping into a young Gordo and his dad, who apparently his dad's a lawyer and stuff like that. Which apparently Gordo is actually, he actually went to school to become a lawyer too. I mean, he just doesn't do anything with his lawyer degree and everything. And it's like, holy crap. And it's one of those situations where you just don't judge a book by its cover, but it's kind of like, holy crap, really? I mean, but then again, it's like for him, him and his dad have problems because it's like, well, his dad looks at him as a disappointment because it's like, you have that law degree and you do absolutely nothing with it. You're a stay-at-home dad. And he's like, well, yeah, taking care of help raise your granddaughter who you don't really interact with at all. So it's kind of like, okay, he has big problems with his dad. But the point I was trying to make is the fact is that he ended up bumping into him. What I was thinking, many different possibilities how this could have gone wrong. At first, I'm like, oh man, Frank is going to get busted. And then I was like, oh, well, what would that mean for everything else? Would that mean it's like, oh, Frank was caught trying to kill Joe or whatever. Like, that's what I thought was going to happen. And it's, well, which could be, but I'll get to that in a second. The fact is, it's like, oh, he gets caught and maybe it changes Raimi's entire life. Maybe she never became a cop. And then she finds herself in a situation, she walking up the station and everything's like, oh, why are you here and everything? When you talking about work here, it's like, you're not a cop. After what your dad did, he's a disgrace to the department. He tried to kill blah, 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 because there was no actual evidence saying that Joe was the killer or whatever. Something like that. Which is still a strong possibility because of the current circumstances. Because it's like someone arrives on the scene, Frank's knocked out, they see a body in his back trunk, which I didn't watch the preview because I wanted to kind of go into next week's episode as blind as possible, but I was like, I get the feeling it's going to be a situation where Frank wakes up and then Joe's gone, and it's like, crap, he escaped. Or, like I said, maybe the police get involved and they find out about it. I don't know. I mean, the whole circumstances is definitely not looking good for Raimi. Because now Raimi's going to have to suffer the ramifications for what she did. Which I'm sure, like, she's going to be on pins and needles hoping, it's like, okay, Frank has got to fix this. Which I'm sure he's going to try and fix even more. I mean, like, it depends. Like, there's so many different directions that could take. It could be that Frank, has to suffer the ramifications because they found Joe in the back of his car. And it's like, now Frank has to answer all these questions. He's being arrested for kidnapping and what this means for him and Julie and Raimi. Then also Raimi in the present day dealing with that. Plus everything that's happened, because it's like, so, like, Raimi's trying so hard to get her original life back. She's making things kind of work with Daniel, but at the same time, she kind of made Kyle get the impression like there was something more, that she's even going to go to dinner with his family and whatnot. So it's kind of like her life is going to collide on both fronts, especially for Daniel. He's like, I literally left my fiance for you, and you're telling me there's someone else in the picture too. Having to make up your damn mind. It's like, does she want the life that she originally had? That's what she's been doing this all for, to get her mom back, as well as the life she had before. I mean, really, it's like, it's literally get this timeline and her life before and combine them together. Get the good sides of both lives and have them together. Like, have Daniel, but also have both her parents alive throughout her entire life. But then there's also the possibility, like, but try something new, because Kyle isn't the guy that, I don't know. I really don't know where that's going to go. I really don't trust Daniel. I just don't. Because something else that kept popping into my head is like, I think I brought this up in the last episode, was like, I don't know what what are the chances of it, but I get the feeling like Joe isn't the Nightingale. Obviously, I brought it up in this one as well, but it's like, it's just something fishy about the whole situation. Like, maybe he didn't even actually kill his wife. I'm thinking, like, what if actually the person behind all of this is actually Megan's brother, Robbie? That she thinks her brother is dead, but he's off somewhere else. And that basically Joe's been covering for him or whatever. Because it would explain why Nightingale is the way he is. It's because his stepfather beat it into him repeatedly, and it, like, warped him into being the person he is. It's like, he saw the stuff that him, his sister, and his mom went through, and he wants to kind of save these people from themselves by giving them a good death. So, I don't know. I feel like Joe's probably neck deep into this, but it's like, I don't think he is. Because he did say, like, he didn't kill those women, and it's like, you could argue he's lying, but it's like, I from the very beginning, I didn't really trust that whole, like, him being a Nightingale thing. It's like, it's too easy. So there's a lot more to it, and maybe we'll kind of find out more about that next episode, maybe not. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, dealing with the whole circumstances of that. I mean, because it is kind of a situation where it's like the worst possibility did come about because Raimi did straight up kill him. And it's like, until Frank does something, she's stuck living that life. So she would have to suffer the consequences for that. And it's like, no telling where that could all go. I'm still, in the back of my mind, suspicious of Daniel. I don't know. It's just like, I don't know, like, I feel like they're setting Daniel up for something, and I don't know whether it's just on a personal life. Obviously, he plays a big role in Raimi's life, but I feel like there's something more to it. I'm, like, very suspicious of him. Like, I brought it up before, and I'll say it again. It's like, he's one of the things that changed most in her life. And it's like, I don't know. It could be a situation where it's actually, like, he's actually Robbie. I don't think so, just because it's like, I don't know, because he is younger than Megan, so I don't know that play a role in that, but plus the whole accent thing, not unless he's faking it, I don't know, like he's been faking the accent the entire time or something like that, or maybe he moved, no, I don't know, I definitely feel like the Nightingale is actually her brother Robbie, and not her, like, I don't know, I'm curious about what went down with the whole situation with Megan, like, the fact is, her dad, I don't think that is a lie. I think her dad is a monster, and it's just because people think she's unstable that they didn't believe her. I don't know, maybe, because I don't know if we actually, like, within the confines of the show, we heard Raimi listen to a lot of them, but I don't know if she actually finished all of them, within the world of the show. Like, we didn't hear her go through all of them, but maybe she, within the show, did. So, like, what else was on those tapes and stuff like that? I don't know. I would have liked to also have her have confirmation with other people, because she even, like, Megan even referenced one of, like, there was a cop at their house, like, having dinner with them. It's got, a little get together, and her brother freaked out because he ended up seeing the wounds on the bruises on his mom's arm, ended up knocking some wine on the dude's jacket and on his uniform, and then, like, Megan kind of over the voiceover is kind of like, oh yeah, the cop felt even worse for us than he did for his clothes. So it's like, did the cop know? Like, were there actual people who did know? Like, for example, him. So it's like, couldn't Raimi have asked that? Because it's like, I guess for Raimi, it's like, no, it's clear cut. He's the killer. This and that, especially the way he reacted last episode, running away like that, the body being in the bag. So I don't know. Maybe he did kill his wife. Maybe it was Robbie who did it, and he was covering it up. I don't know. Cause maybe the entire time Megan was right about everything, but it's just she got the wrong person, Or maybe he did kill his wife, but then that still caused kind of a break in Robbie's psyche that led to him becoming the Nightingale. I don't know. It's hard to say. Kind of another, like, minor storyline that kind of popped up in this is the whole Satch situation, because it's like Satch is like he basically was talking about the whole Stan situation, basically saying it's a lot more complicated. And that Frank's like, it's not. You should have had my back. I'm your partner. Yeah, I mean, he's moving out of Satch's place mainly because of that, but also because things between him and Julie are getting better. But it was mainly because of that. But Julie's like, oh, you can always stay on the couch and stuff like that. So. I think I've brought it up before, could be wrong, I might be giving myself too much credit, but it's like, I do believe that there is something there with Satch and Stan, I mean, obviously, but it's like, I think Stan has some dirt on Satch. Maybe Satch didn't do something the most legal way in the past, or maybe Stan helped cover Satch's tracks, and it's like, ever since then, he's kind of been under Satch's thumb, under Stan's thumb, and has to do what he says, or, getting blackmailed and stuff like that, so, like, because it did seem like it wasn't just because it doesn't seem like a situation where, like, Satch is just outright, like, oh yeah, I believe Stan. It's like, no, it's like, he knows that Stan's a bad guy, but it seems like there's more to why he defends him, because he goes above and beyond, because it's like, with everything that's happened, you would think he would have Frank's back about these beliefs. He wouldn't have done that, so I feel like it's got to be a situation where it's like, maybe Stan's threatened his family, like, besides probably, maybe he blackmailed him and has, like, it's like, yo, because basically, Satch even said it himself, like, last time, like, he's not going to have Frank bring his career down. Meaning, I'm guessing, like, if something happens to Stan, like, Stan's going to destroy Satch, and now basically mean not just destroying him, but destroying his family's life, too, because kind of just what happened with Frank, when he died and was considered a dirty cop, like, Raimi still had to hold that stigma against her. I mean, even she held that stigma against herself. I'm like, oh, I'm a Solomon. My dad was a dirty cop. So, something similar to that. I don't know. I mean, Stan hasn't become too much of a problem in present day. He definitely won in the past, but he has presented himself as being like, oh, possibly a something that Raimi's gonna have to deal with present day too. So I'm sure that's gonna become obviously it's like kind of one of the storylines because like obviously Night Go kind of takes front and center. So like I said, a very good episode. I'm just very curious to see like what direction this all takes. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.